Yeah, I'd like to just take a moment and, we decided as a group that it's still really important for us to go over the three objects of the Theosophical Society, to remember what the society stands for, and then for those who are new and who haven't been here before or come occasionally to join our meetings, and they'll have an idea of where we're coming from. So remembering that the Theosophical Society is an international nonprofit organization. It was began in 1875, and the Theosophical Society in Detroit is a local lodge that began in 1918. And so I really like to visit the vision, the mission, and the ethic, as well as the three objects, because it gives us a more round and whole picture. So the Theosophical Society in America, which the lodge is a part of, has a vision of wholeness that inspires a fellowship united in study, meditation, and service. Its mission is to encourage open-minded inquiry into world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts in order to understand the wisdom of the ages, respect the unity of all life, and help people explore spiritual self-transformation. Its ethic holds that our every action, feeling, and thought affects all other beings, and that each of us is capable of and responsible for contributing to the benefit of the whole. And you'll see that that is all of what I said is directly related to the three objects. And those are to, first and foremost, form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. To encourage, secondly, the comparative study of religion, philosophy, and science. And thirdly, to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity. So that is quite related to the science of yoga. And the society has, if you've read any theosophical literature, which almost all of us here have, will consistently refer to yoga. And so I felt very strongly about having, we occasionally have a talk on yoga. And I felt strongly about having somebody that was kind of tied to Paramahansa Yogananda in some way or another. And so in that desire, I was able to connect with Roy Thibodeau, who is here to speak with us today. So I'd like to share with you his bio if you haven't had a chance to read it. Roy was first introduced into the science of Raja and Kriya Yoga in December of 1971, when he graduated from Western Michigan University, and he received the gift of the autobiography of a yogi. Many of you probably have read it. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I only just read it last January, and I was very deeply touched by it. His thirst for truth and self-realization or enlightenment became unquenchable. And in March of 1972, he met his guru, Yogacharya J. Oliver Black, and was initiated into Kriya Yoga by him in June of that year. In December of that year, he moved to Song of the Morning Ranch to live at the ashram with his guru. He lived there for 3 years, moved to the Gaylord area, was married by Yogacharya, and started a family. He and his wife, Mary Ann, currently live in Grosse Pointe, and both have been practicing and teaching yoga and meditation for over 45 years. So I would like to give a warm welcome to Roy. Roy, thank you so much for joining us today. And this is now your time to share.
Well, thank you, Sandy. I appreciate the warm introduction and meeting all of you on Zoom today. Hopefully this will be over sometime soon. We can meet in person. As Sandy said, I've been practicing yoga and meditation since about 1972, when I met my guru in March of that year. And I read the autobiography of a yogi, as Sandy said, and the author of that is Paramahansa Yogananda, and it's today it's probably considered a spiritual classic. Um, and I put together a little PowerPoint presentation. I shared it, so probably most of you can see it. I think all of you can see it. And at the bottom, I want to start with something we always do. It's kind of something Yogananda did, and my we always started our meetings with the person leading the meeting say, "How is everyone?" And they would respond, "Awake and ready." And then we would say, "How feels everyone?" And they would respond, "Awake and ready." So I like to do that now just to get you all so you're paying attention, energized. So how is everyone?
Awake and ready.
How feels everyone?
Awake and ready.
Well, we got one anyway. That's good. Good start. Putting this together, this is supposed to be a talk. Sandy asked me to talk about Raja Yoga and Kriya Yoga. They're intertwined a little bit, but they also are separate. So this first part here is just a little bit of my background, much of which has already been said. I was also, after Yogacharya, my guru died in 1989. When a yogi, a realized yogi dies, we call him Mahasamadhi. And I was a fairly young man then. There was a lot of years where we only could connect through meditation. And then I sought out another disciple of Yogananda's named Roy Eugene Davis. He had an ashram and retreat in Lakemont, Georgia, which is northeastern Georgia. And I had him ordain me and qualify me to give Kriya initiation. I think it was back in 2010, I believe. Usually when it's a smaller group, I'll go by and ask everyone to introduce themselves and maybe relate why they're here and what their background is and what they hope to get out of the work session we have here. But it's too many of you to do that now, so we'll skip that. So we'll get right into Raja and Kriya Yoga. The first thing to think about is, what the heck does yoga mean? What is that word? It's a Sanskrit word, not necessarily Hindu, but Sanskrit. And many experts think that Sanskrit is the original language of all. But yoga, sometimes in some scripture and some tomes, it's just called yog, Y-O-G. But it's a Sanskrit word that means to yoke, or to bind, or to unite with, or to become one with, or possibly to commune with. And to me, that always poses a question. Well, become one with what? Yoke to what? Bind to what? Yoga doesn't really care about that. Yoga kind of takes an impersonal stance on that and says, whatever you think is the ultimate reality is what yoga is trying to get you to unite with. So you might call it God, you might call it Allah, you might call it Yahweh, you might just call it spirit or cosmic consciousness. You might even worship money or power. And you know what? Yoga says so, it's okay. If you can concentrate and use these techniques, that'll eventually get you to what you're trying to get to. So yoga also has another definition. The primary definition is that state of consciousness, and in Hinduism, they call it samadhi. In Buddhism, they call it nirvana. In the West, we tend to use the word communion. But it also means the process by which you attain that state. And I think that's what makes yoga unique. My guru, Yogacharya Oliver, used to always say, yoga is a science, it's not a religion. And what he meant by that is my background, when I went to Western Michigan, I got a degree in math and physics. So my background is very rational and scientific. And so what he means by that is in science, they have this thing they call a scientific method. in which people, scientists, experiment with things and they try to prove different theories they have. And if they can prove the theory, then they say that theory is proven. It becomes a law of physics or chemistry or whatever science you're involved in. Well, yoga is like that. Yoga takes down the science of attaining cosmic consciousness or God consciousness, and it breaks it down to step-by-step procedures that these colossal souls that have men and women that have come before us have taken through the millennia and have proven that these techniques work to attain this state of consciousness. And that's what makes it scientific. So what I'm saying is that if you use these methods and you follow the steps precisely and exactly, particularly if you have a guru or spiritual guide, you're assured to get to your destination, which is different from most religions, by the way, because most religions tend to be a little bit based on superstition sometimes. They're based on blind faith. They don't give you really any clear instructions. Well, what are you trying to achieve and how do you achieve it? In that regard, yoga is very scientific and it's very direct. And then when you look into the background of yoga, yoga has been around since the beginning of mankind, really. But it was first written down by Patanjali. He has the first written treatise on yoga, and that is called Patanjali's Sutras. There's 4 books to the sutras. They're roughly around 50 sutras each, so there's close to 200. I think it's 196 sutras throughout the Patanjali Sutras. And what they are is they're really just short statements. Sutras are like in math, you'd call them postulates. They're just short statements of truth. And to be honest, I don't think they give you a lot of guidance, but they really do explain a lot of things, but they don't always tell you how to get there. For instance, the very first sutra, and you see it on your screen there, is, and now yoga. Patanjali was trying to get the attention of his students, so they paid attention. And so now in our current age, Yogananda used, and my guru used, says, how is everyone? Just trying to get you to pay attention so that you learn what they're trying to teach you. And the second sutra is very profound. It's really the essence of yoga. And it's translated, it's in Sanskrit, and it's not always translated exactly the same. But in my memory, the way I've memorized the second sutra is that yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. Think of that. You can see a couple other definitions there. Yoga is to still the patterning of the consciousness, or yoga is the suppression of the modifications of the mind. Very similar to what I said. But it doesn't tell you how to do that, it just tells you what it is. And the third sutra is equally as profound. And of these 3 sutras, they tell you all you need to know really about philosophy. The third sutra says, then the seer dwells in his own nature. Or another verse is, then pure awareness can abide in its very nature. Those are all 3, or particularly the second and third, are profound statements, but they don't really tell you how to achieve these states of consciousness. And then, of course, you have, which is probably in today's world, the preeminent Hindu scripture, which is called the Bhagavad Gita. I imagine, I can't see everybody, but how many, by show of hands, have ever heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Most people, hasn't been in the West very long. The first English translations were back in the times of Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, who both read the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, and were American yogis, I would say. But the Gita is a discourse. It's a short book, It's easy to read. You can find it for free on the internet now. And the version I like the best is by Sir Edward Arnold, who was an Englishman who went to India and lived there, became a yogi, and translated the Bhagavad Gita into English. And it's a very poetic version. I like it because of the poetic verses, which make it easier to memorize verses. But in the 6th chapter of the Gita, and there's 18 chapters, but in the 6th chapter is all about yoga and meditation. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it even goes in to describe the different paths of yoga, which are karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana, raja, kriya. And I'll get into those a little bit in just a moment. So that brings us now to defining what is Raja Yoga. Well, Raja means kingly, or what's another word? Royal. So it just means a royal or kingly yoga, and was really kind of brought into definition by a king yogi in India named Janakananda. And from his lineage, they kind of came up with this, and it's technically called Patanjali's Eightfold Path. So it's really taking Patanjali's sutras, which there's 196, I believe, and it distills it down to these 8 different steps. And I've had a lot of people tell me, I know some things about Buddhism. I'm not an expert on it, but I've also been told this is similar to the Buddhist Eightfold Path. But this is the essence of Raja Yoga. There's 2 parts of it, really. This is the first part. And you can see the 8 steps here. And I can tell you from my own experience and from watching the way people work and the way their minds work, that everyone is going to go through these steps on their way to enlightenment. You're never going to skip any. They interrelate a little bit. There's not just clear defining sections between each ones. They overlap. But everyone's going to go through these 8 stages to attain enlightenment or liberation or cosmic consciousness. And the first step and the second step are related. They're a little bit like the 10 Commandments that we have in Judaism and Christianity. And the first step is called yama. And that means you have to begin to avoid the things that are harmful for you, the things you shouldn't do. Lying, stealing, killing, the negative things that people do in the society, even go as far as to impurity of thoughts or poor diet or poor habits for health. Those things come into play there as well. And then the next step, which is related to the first really, is niyamas. And these are to do the things positively that you should do. So the first step is to start to avoid and not do the things you shouldn't do that are harmful for you, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and to begin to do the things that are good for you. Somewhat like I said, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal, honor thy father and mother. So there's a mixture of good and bad, but typically, I know myself, I was raised Catholic. When you think of the 10 Commandments, it's usually about thou shalt nots. I have to tell you something, because this is critical. People don't even get into more advanced philosophy unless they've made progress in these. They don't care about anything else. If they're into their bad habits, it's all they think about. And if they're trying to get out of their bad habits, most likely they'll start other bad habits. Yoga gives you the key here. The way to get rid of bad habits is first you have to recognize you have them and you want to get rid of them. And the second step is you have to replace them with some good habits, because you just can't eliminate bad habits. You got 24 hours in a day, and you're going to fill all 24 hours of those days. If you have any extra hours, I'd be happy to take them from you. But you don't. You have 24 hours, and we fill them all with something. So if you don't consciously start to do good things, you'll never replace the bad things. It isn't going to happen. And there's an addition here, and yoga gives us this idea and technique. Remember, yoga is all about techniques. How do you do these things? And the easiest way to overcome a bad habit is replace it with a good habit. And you do that by beginning to change the people you associate with. And the more consciously you do it, the quicker it happens. So for instance, alcoholics are easy to pick on, so I'll probably do it a lot. Alcoholics, what do they do when they finally decide they have a problem? Well, a lot of them join AA, don't they? And I would suggest that's a good way, because you start to associate with people who, at the very least, are trying to overcome the same problem, and they give you support. It's not the best method, though, because what do all those people have in common? They're alcoholics, every one of them. And alcoholics will tell you there's never a recovered alcoholic. I would know I'm not an alcoholic, but I believe them. So the very best thing is, that's an intermediate step. The very best thing is to associate with people that don't drink, that can find happiness and joy and have companions, and they don't drink. That's the fastest way to get rid of a bad habit, is to recognize you have it and then resolve to replace it with a good habit. And do that the fastest way is by associating with people that are already like how you want to become. And that's a tough proposition for most people. You can't really take it. You can't, it's hard if you're an alcoholic. It's hard to be around people that don't drink all the time. But if you're going to resolve that problem, that's what you have to do. In fact, that's the idea of finding a guru, by the way, and living in an ashram. Immersing yourself in this culture of people who are already where you want to go. You almost get there by osmosis. And if you don't do that, chances are very slim you're going to accomplish it in that lifetime. Might take several, might take 100, who knows? Depends on how serious you get about it. The next step is asana. And that's where hatha yoga, the physical practice, starts to come into play. Although asana doesn't really mean hatha yoga, but it comes into play in this area. This is the area where the yogi focuses mostly on health. So you can get strong and healthy, have vitality and longevity. And the reason for that is, if you're sick and unwell and full of aches and pains, it's not very likely you're going to be able to focus on any of these other higher aspects of yoga. So at this point, you begin to say, I need to live a long time so I can accomplish this. I need to be healthy so the body is not an obstruction to my progress. And you got to learn to get into a good posture so you can sit longer in meditation so you'd accomplish these goals. So asana becomes very important for you promoting your health. So you have enough time and enough health and enough strength and vitality that you can begin to accomplish these things. And the next step, the fourth step, is called pranayama. And you'll notice that at the end is yama, which is the same word as the first step. And yama, in roughly translated, means control. And prana, if you know anything about the Hindu philosophy and yoga, prana means like the life force. It's the energy in the body that animates the body. So what this step means, it means control of the life force. And usually in the practice of yoga, you'll begin that with breathing exercises, because the breath and the mind and the heart are all inseparably linked. Really, the mind controls the heart, the breath, and the mind. I mean, the mind controls the heart and the breath. However, most of us have such little mental control that we don't know how to do that. So the beginning is to usually use the breath, because the breath is something tangible that we can work with. And if we start to slow the breathing down, make it longer and rhythmic, then we start to slow the mind down. And remember what that second sutra said in Patanjali's sutra. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So all of these steps of yoga are trying to give you more and more control of your own mind. The mind is such a powerful force in the universe, and most of us have such little control of it. And yoga is trying to get you to control the mind, not just a little bit, but 100%. But it's showing you the steps you need to take to get there. So Yogananda and my guru and Sri Yukteswar, who is Yogananda's guru, used to say often, learn how to behave. That's the first two steps, yamas and niyamas. Learn to behave. That takes a lot of mental control. And so that's the first thing you do to gain mental control, those two things. If you haven't done those yet, you're not even going to be interested in the next steps. Believe me, I've seen enough people, I've taught enough classes. Only those people that are starting to get control of their behavior get into the next steps. So then the fourth step, this pranayama, you're trying to control not the breath really, but we use the breath as a tool to control the life force. And the life force is what animates the body. In the West, we would tend to call the life force the soul. You know, the soul enters the body, yogis say, with the first breath, and it exits the body on the last breath. What is the soul? The soul animates the body, gives it life, it lights it up. And pranayama says we need to learn how to control that, how to bring it under control. And how do you do that? With the mind and with willpower. The next step is called pratyahara, the fifth step. Pratyahara is withdrawing from the senses. And what that means is the senses are really our enemies in our process and our road to enlightenment and self-realization. And that is because it keeps the life force outward going all the time through the five senses. Seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching. Our energy, our life force, our soul is always getting projected out through the five senses, and it keeps us so distracted that we can't ever realize our true nature. And our true nature is the same as God nature. We're one and the same. When you can realize your true nature, you realize the nature of God. And it's not possible in the beginning to do it when your energy is going out through the senses all the time. It's just not going to happen. And so in this step, because we've learned to control the prana from pranayama, now what we begin to do is withdraw the prana from the senses. Because they're too distracting. They keep us from our true goal. They keep us from realizing our true self, our true nature. That's what self-realization means. And that self is with a capital S. Your true self, your soul nature. And now the last three steps in the science of yoga, these last steps sometimes are called yoga proper. And the first five steps are kind of preparing you for this. And so what the sixth step is called dharana. And what that means is perfect concentration. Remember, I said the whole path of yoga is teaching you how to get control of your mind. 100%. The mind is all powerful. If you can control your mind, you can do anything. And I'm not exaggerating. Anything. As Sandy said, she just read the autobiography of a yogi last year. I think I've read it 7, 8, 9 times. Each time I read it, I get more out of it. But you read that and it blows your mind to what yogis in India and spiritual people throughout the world also. It's not very much an organized religion in the West. We don't see it very much. But you see in this book and you see human beings, if they get control of their mind, can do virtually anything. We call them miracles in Christianity, but to yogis, they're not miracles. They're everyday activities. They just know how to operate these natural laws with their mind. Well, dharana is that perfect concentration that's needed. What is perfect concentration? It's the ability to hold one thought for as long as you like. How many can do that? I know a lot of people when they first start to meditate, I teach a lot of meditation classes, some in the adult ed in the area, and sometimes the first time people meditate, they're flabbergasted at how little control of their mind they have, and how their mind just rushes from one thing to the other a million miles a minute. So remember, the first sutra, the second, excuse me, is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. That's what dharana is, perfect concentration. But you have to go through all these steps or you're never going to get there. And then the next step is meditation. So we talk about meditation a lot, but when I give you the definition of meditation, you're going to realize virtually no one really practices meditation. They're practicing to get ready to meditate, which is important. I'm not disputing that, but meditation is defined as perfect concentration on God, or whatever you consider ultimate reality. You might not call it God, you might call it Allah, you might say it's nirvana, cosmic consciousness. Yoga doesn't care about that. That's up to you to decide. But they're just telling you how to become one with that, whatever it is that you think that it is. If you call it God, wonderful. If you call it Brahma, great. Maybe you don't want to call it by a name, you call it nirvana instead. That's fine too. Yoga is okay with any of that. It's real scientific. You might find it easier to call it God or Jesus or Buddha because it becomes more personal to you, but it's not required in yoga. And then the final step is samadhi. This is a funny one. It always makes me laugh a little bit. And in their samadhi is actually the meaning of yoga, and samadhi is synonymous. Or you might call it cosmic consciousness, or ever new unending bliss, or you might call it nirvana. Again, yoga doesn't care about that, but the Hindu word for it is samadhi. And what does that mean? That means to become one with that. And so in meditation, there's you and your ego, and there's what you're meditating on. And they're separate at that point. And so in the mythology of Hinduism, there's three gods, three main gods. There's Brahma, the creator. There's Vishnu, which is the preserver. And there is, who's the destroyer? Can't think of the Hindu name off the top of my head. I will, don't worry.
Shiva.
Pardon?
Shiva.
Shiva, yes, Shiva. How can I forget Shiva? Actually, in yoga, sometimes Shiva is considered the originator of yoga, and sometimes I say he's the patron saint of yoga, because in the end, the idea that you're separate from God is ego. Really, we're not separate from God. There's no real separation except in our ego, our minds. And so the last step is you have to kill the ego. You have to kill the mind. And you have to let it go so that you can merge with the infinite consciousness. And that's the objective of yoga. Now you might say, who cares about that? What motivates me to do that, other than maybe just some natural curiosity? Well, this is what yogis say. Yogis really, when they define God, you know what they say it is? They say it's unending, ever-changing bliss, because it's the one thing that we all seek. No one ever does anything to become less happy. Everything you do, whether you do it consciously or not, is actually done to become happier. Why do we even gain our bad habits? Why do we become alcoholics? Because we have a drink and we get a little pleasure from it, and then we pursue that pleasure again and again until it becomes a habit that we can't quit. So everything we do is motivated by this pursuit of bliss or joy. And unfortunately, we make a lot of mistakes in our ego on the way to that. But that's the motivating factor, and that pure bliss and joy. And it has to be unending, and it needs to be ever new, because it isn't ever new. We get a little tired of it. We want it to be ever changing so that it keeps us engrossed, and it keeps us always interested and engaged. And that's how yogis define really what God or samadhi or cosmic consciousness is. And then I'm going to move on. I don't want to bore you to death with all this stuff. The next part of Raja Yoga is there's various paths of Raja Yoga. And to be honest, there's as many paths of yoga as there are individuals, but they've defined at least 5 or 6 that are basically everyone's going to follow one of these paths or a combination or some offshoot of that that's similar. And they are the path of Hatha Yoga. We talked about that. So that's for the most part, it's a physical part, but Hatha Yoga can, if it's done properly, can be a complete path of yoga, can lead you to enlightenment or samadhi. Not just the samadhis, but it gets into the breath. Ultimately, when you get really engaged in Hatha Yoga, it brings you into pranayama, which then automatically brings you to pratyahara, which then, and you need to have one-pointed concentration to even achieve that. So it automatically leads you to those states. Probably the one that most people are most familiar with, I would say a good example of this might be Mother Teresa, is karma yogi. Most yogis would say Mother Teresa was a karma yogi. What does that mean? That's the path of selfless service to fellow man. And what that does for you, it begins that process of expanding your awareness to include all souls so that you serve them. And as you do that, you see the unity behind all souls, which will lead you to this state of consciousness. And it will hone your concentration. Remember, we all have to go through this path towards concentration. Another path is Jnana Yoga. Starts with a J, but it's in Hinduism, it's Jnana Yoga. It's a path of the intellect, discrimination, wisdom. And it's whenever we study something, whenever we read scripture, whenever you have a class like this, you're in the path of Jnana Yoga. You're trying to get knowledge and realization through the intellect. It's a good path to follow. It's a little bit dry. It's arduous. It's difficult. And for the most part, it can't take you the whole way there, because remember, in the end, we have to kill the mind. The Bhagavad Gita says the mind and the intellect are the helper, but they also are the bar. They help you to get organized. You need them to take these steps, but ultimately, it can't take you to that state of cosmic consciousness. You have to give up your ego for that. There's a path of Bhakti Yoga, which is a path of love and devotion, which is probably most often practiced by Christian saints. We have all these saints in Christianity. Almost all of them were Bhakti yogis. They did it primarily through their love and devotion for Jesus Christ. And they were able to attain these higher states of consciousness through that one-pointed concentration of devotion. I often say love and devotion are, another word for that is enthusiasm and pointed concentration. Your enthusiasm for something is your love for it, and it forces you to concentrate. There's a path of Laya Yoga, which is a path of sound and vibration, using the vibration of the universe. In Hinduism and yoga, we call that the Om sound. But Om isn't only sound. Om technically is vibration, and all of the senses use vibration. So you have light's vibration, sound's vibration, even smell and touch and taste. There's vibrations that are auditorial nerves, our taste buds, our tensile nerves. They sense that vibration. Everything has a vibration, and we hear it. When we hear it in meditation, we call that the sound of Om. And then we can use that to expand our consciousness, because the whole universe is vibrating. There isn't anywhere where this vibration isn't. And the last one that I have listed here, it's a little different, and I'm going to explain the difference in a second, but it's Kriya Yoga, which is part of what we're talking about tonight. Kriya Yoga, I must say the difference between Kriya Yoga and Raja Yoga is Raja Yoga lays out the philosophy. It tells you the steps you're going to go through. It defines them pretty well. There's been volumes written on each of these steps. You can find the Hindus are incredible the way they define spirituality, and they use their intellect. Sometimes it's too much. I have a math and physics degree, and I just shake my head and say these people are crazy. But they do it. But what Kriya Yoga does is says, okay, all that's true. This should be your motivation to get there. But these are the step-by-step techniques you need to get there. That's what Kriya means. Kriya is the root word of Kriya is Kri, which is the same root that's in karma, which means an action or a technique. So Kriya Yoga is specific techniques that we use throughout the process to attain and move through these eightfold steps that Patanjali's laid out. And so generally speaking though, and I can't talk too much about it because it's really unique to each person. And it's very important that you be initiated by a guru. So actually today, we try to keep it secret, but some people don't follow through on that. So just like Masonry and probably any secrets Theosophical society might have, some people get disenchanted and they tell everybody else. But that's okay, because if you don't have a good teacher, if you don't associate with the right people, if you don't practice regularly, you're probably not going to make any progress anyway. So again, here's the specific steps you can take. Study scripture and books on yoga, meditation with an open mind. Develop your willpower and discrimination. Willpower actually is what controls the mind. So as we learn to control the mind, we're strengthening our willpower. And with mind and willpower, believe me, you can just do anything. Begin to associate people who you want to be like. You know, when I met my guru, I was a young man. I just got out of college. At the time, I just had a birthday. I was probably 23. And I didn't know him. I didn't know about him. But I heard there was a self-realization fellowship meditation group that met at the Detroit Institute of Arts in Detroit on Sundays. And I had a friend who actually gave me the autobiography. And he lived in Kalamazoo. He stayed, that's where Western is. He stayed there. And he came into town and he said, I heard there's a meditation group in Detroit. Do you want to go? I said, well, sure, because I didn't know anybody else other than him that meditated. And I wanted to be around some people. And so we went down there, and there were three of us, and we were hippies back then, you know, long hair and a beard and bell-bottom pants and all that kind of stuff. And we got there late, like good hippies would. And we went in, the place was dark because they were meditating, and it was fairly full. He used to get 300 to 500 people every Sunday for his meditation in the Art Institute in the main auditorium. And we stumbled around. We finally found seats. We didn't know anything about Yogacharya at the time. I remember when we left, we said to each other, he said, who was that little old man on stage and why wouldn't he shut up? Didn't he know we were trying to meditate? And 2 or 3 weeks later, I found out really it was this really advanced disciple of Yogananda's and my guru. Well, when I finally met him personally, someone introduced me to him. Because what I started to do is go every Sunday, and I kind of wormed my way into doing some things so I could come early. And a woman named Betty Howard, she's passed now, but she was from Chicago. She probably brought as many people to him as anyone I know. And she took me down and sat me beside him, and I listened. And right away, I listened. He was telling stories about some of his experiences with Yogananda. And I had recently read the autobiography of a yogi. And I thought, holy smokes, he knew Yogananda. And so I listened more intently. And he was the happiest person I ever met in my life. Still is. Never met anyone happier. And I can't tell you the number of times Yogacharya said Yogananda was the happiest person he ever met. And I made up my mind then. I thought, that's what I want. I want to be like that. I want to be happy like that. And so now I tell people I'm the happiest person I know. But that's what you want. That's what you want to find. And that's what's God's nature is pure bliss. Because can you imagine that God isn't happy? Whatever your concept of God, what's the point of being God if you're not happy? I mean, come on. And then you finally, when you get your techniques, you have to practice them faithfully and with the guidance of a guru, if that's possible for you. And I have to tell you, it's my guru put it this way. Someone asked him, is it necessary to have a guru to find God, or is it impossible to find God without a guru? And he said, well, let me put it this way. He said, I won't say it's not possible, because everything in God is possible. But he said, I don't know anyone who's ever done it. And then he added, besides, why would you want to make it any more difficult than it already is? Why do you want to fight that? So here's some biblical scriptures that you're probably all aware of that are related to meditation. It's in Psalms in the Old Testament. Be still and know that I am God. What can that be than a description of meditation? And the technique we use in meditation is in our lineage, we roll our eyes upward, focusing at the point between the eyebrows. And in both the Old and New Testament, Jesus said it, the Old Testament says it. It says, look up and pray. That's a reference to using that technique. And then Jesus said, both in Matthew and Luke, he said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. This is the single eye. You see a lot of Hindu women, they have a dot here in the middle of their forehead, just above the eyebrows. That's a symbol for the spiritual eye, or in yoga, we call it the sixth chakra or the Ajna center. And Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light, making a reference to this point. And then again, in Luke, it says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Not outside, inside. What more could we say that gives the reference to meditation? And then you get into some trouble areas with real religionists that are strict in their religion. And for the most part, once you get far enough along in yoga and meditation, you really don't care about that. They have their own problems. They're not my problems. That's something they have to overcome for themselves. But, they get into, it's particularly common in Christianity, but it pervades all the religions, believe me. They want to make whoever their founder was, whoever their leader was, like the Christians have done with Jesus, they want to make them the best. They want to make their religion the only way. They want to make, as the Christians have done, Jesus is the only Son of God. But Jesus never said that. Jesus said he was a Son of God, but he never said he was the only Son of God. The other people said that about him. What did he say? He said, but as many as receive him, he gave them the power to be sons of God. And he said to the Jewish priests, he said, when they said he committed heresy, he said, well, what does it say in the prophets say? He said, you're all gods. And that's the truth. Here's some bibliographies. I show you here the autobiography of Yogi Raja Yoga. That was written by Swami Vivekananda. He actually was probably the first yogi to come to America in the 1800s. He came around 1890. He before Yogananda came, but he didn't stay that long. He only stayed maybe 10 years. But he was famous in the times that even in Michigan, he has an ashram over in Western Michigan in a county called Ganges County, of all things. Everybody knows the famous river the sacred river in India is called the Ganges. They named that Ganges County because of Swami Vivekananda. And he met with this governor of Michigan and all of that. And then you have the Holy Science. That was written by Swami Sri Yukteswar who is Yogananda's guru. It's a really, Sri Yukteswar was kind of a jnana yogi. He's very intellectual, and this book is unbelievably intellectual if you want to read it. But it really integrates how Christianity, original Christianity, and yoga are really the same thing. My guru often said that the Bible is just a instruction on yoga. And then of course you have the Yoga Sutras. And there's some websites that this one here is one that I have. It's about my guru Yogacharya Oliver. If you want to know more about him and different stages of his life, you can look at. I have a website for our organization, glysa.net, stands for Golden Lotus Yoga for Spiritual Awareness. Song of the Morning, that's the yoga retreat that I was just up there last weekend, and Yogananda founded that in 1970. It's 800 acres on the Pigeon River. We often call it the Holy Pigeon, kind of like the Holy Ganges. And then Yogananda's organization, SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship, that's website. Self-Realization Fellowship is probably the biggest yoga organization in the world today, with several million people that are members. But it's not yoga as, in the West, we've come to see yoga as meaning the physical asanas and postures. That's one part of yoga, and I teach Hatha Yoga. We have a teachers association, but it's really a pretty small part of yoga. And it can go to the full way, but most people need that just to get started, to get healthy, strong, so they can begin some of the other practices. And then there's Roy Eugene Davis's organization is the final website. Roy passed Mahasamadhi, be 2 years in March. Then I have a chakra chart, if you're interested in that. Once we withdraw from the senses, we call that pratyahara. Everyone has to go through this stage to enlightenment. You have these 7 chakras from the base of the spine to the top of the head. And when you can finally withdraw from the senses, you draw the energy away from the tissues of the body, back through the nervous system into the spine. And then we lifted up the spine, pierced those chakras. Each chakra has a state of consciousness associated with it. And here's finally, cosmic consciousness is in the crown chakra. But we have to go through all these chakras to reach the crown chakra. And if you read the Bible, the New Testament, the last chapter, the book of Revelations, is all about the chakras and meditation. He calls them 7 churches and 7 stars and 7 seals. He's talking about the 7 chakras. He talks about the sounds that are associated with them, the trumpet sound, the sound of rushing waters. All of these are common in yoga philosophy. These great saints and sages of all religions knew these things. You can look at some of this. Well, you can't. You don't have it. My wife and I both teach yoga classes, Hatha Yoga. We have a Sunday meditation, 10 o'clock. Right now we have it in our home because of COVID. We're looking for another place. We did it at the War Memorial once a month, but we're not able to do that now because of COVID. So we're looking for another place. They're doing some remodeling, so it doesn't look like we're going to be able to go back there anytime soon. But if you're interested, you go to our website. Now I'll keep that updated. But anyone's welcome to attend. We also have a meditation group every Thursday. Last night, for instance, we have a meditation again in our home from 7:30 to 8:30. And any level, if I see people that are new and seem to be inexperienced, I'll give more instruction. If the people, like last night, there were only 3 of us, and I know we're all experienced meditators, so I don't say very much. But we also, I don't have it on here, but we have a, what do you call it, a Facebook page, Golden Lotus Yoga for Spiritual Awareness. And we broadcast the meditation Thursday and the Sunday service on Facebook Live, if you're interested. And then I'm going to close my talk, I think I'm about on time, with this final thought from the Upanishads. Of course, this is the Om symbol, which is a symbol for the cosmic vibration, the sound of Om. But this is from the Upanishads, and something Yogacharya quoted often. When the five senses and the mind are still, and reason itself rests in silence, then begins the path supreme. So you really haven't even started this supreme path until you get to that point. I'm going to move out of this sharing part now. Now I can see all of your shiny faces. Any questions? Anything anyone wants to say? Comments, questions? Any of your own thoughts or experiences? And I think that's the key to yoga. Yoga is about you having your own enlightenment, your own experience. Doesn't matter what Jesus did or what Yogananda did or what Buddha did or Muhammad. What matters is your experience. And so yoga provides the methods and the techniques and the way to have that universal consciousness, that joy and ecstasy that comes with that as your own personal experience. And once you have that, nobody can prove anything different to you. No one can tell me what I'm saying is not true because I have experience. I know that it's true. I don't care what you say. It doesn't matter. I have my own experience. And so that's what yoga is trying to provide for you, is to have your own experience. And if you can find a guru or someone that is close to your path, if you can find a really enlightened spiritual teacher, or at least someone that's farther advanced than you are, that can show you the way to get there, that's the best way. To hang out with other people who are spiritual aspirants gets you there faster than any other method. Of course, you have to practice on your own. That's important. You can't talk about meditation. You have to practice meditation. You can talk about it, but talking about these things really, like this class, unless you do something about it, doesn't do much for you. You can talk about meditation till you're blue in the face, but if you never practice, you don't get a whole lot of benefit out of that. Even reading scriptures, they're helpful, but they'll only tell you what to do. And if you don't do it, you haven't made much progress yet. So any questions? I'm going to shut up for a while. I can talk forever about this, but
I have a question.
sure.
You mentioned that if your goal is wealth and power, that can be reached through yoga. And I'm wondering how wealth and power is something that helps you realize cosmic consciousness. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Well, attaining those things in themselves really doesn't. Although you might say the ultimate wealth and power resides within God. Because what is there that God doesn't have already? What power is there that God doesn't already possess? Remember, I'm going to go in a roundabout way, but hopefully I'll make some points for you and others. If you strive for money, some of Yogananda's disciples were wealthy men and women. In fact, his probably his main disciple, who is James Lynn, or he was given the title Rajasi, was a very, very wealthy man. In fact, he endowed SRF, so it presented them to allow them to move into the future financially stable. My guru, Yogacharya, was a automotive executive. He owned his own company. He was pretty wealthy. At one time, he was the largest landowner in the state of Michigan. And so having wealth in itself is not a detriment for spiritual progress, but it can be if it's your only goal. But what it does, even if it's your only goal, you know what it does for you? It brings you on this path of learning how to concentrate and achieve goals. So remember, in those 8 steps in the Eightfold Path, You're always learning until the last step to control your mind. So if you learn to concentrate fully, attaining wealth isn't that difficult. It may not be in your karmic pattern, so that might make it difficult for you. But if you can concentrate 100% on your goal, you will attain your goal. You'll manifest it. And so I'm not saying attaining wealth in itself will lead you to enlightenment, but it helps you to learn how to concentrate. And the second step is the quickest way to attain wealth is to start to associate with other wealthy people. That's a step in yoga. Now, again, I don't know that associating with all these wealthy people is going to get you enlightened, because most wealthy people are not enlightened, believe me. Of course, most people in general are not enlightened. So I could talk about any group of people and say most of them aren't enlightened. Even I would submit to you, most Christian ministers and priests are not enlightened. I would even quibble a little bit with someone like the Pope being enlightened. I wouldn't doubt him, but I wouldn't follow him. So the quickest way to enlightenment is to try to find other spiritual enlightened people and then hang out with them. In fact, in the Bhagavad, or in the Mahabharata, one of Krishna's disciples never meditated, didn't do anything. He just hung out with Krishna. And when someone criticized him, Krishna said something to him. He says, well, what else do I need other than to be around with you and absorb your consciousness? So half the battle is who you associate with. And the other half is to practice the techniques that your spiritual teacher gives to you. So money can be a detriment, but it doesn't have to be a detriment. If it helps you to learn how to control your mind and strengthen your willpower, then it's helpful. And then if you use your wealth for good purposes, like Rajasi did, as my guru, Mr. Black Yogacharya did, then it's even an asset. You've used it not only for your own benefit, but to benefit others. And that gets into the area of what we call karma yoga.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's see, what else can I talk about? How many
I have
people have
one.
problems?
Well, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so I guess my question is
I can't tell who's talking though.
it's Kate.
Okay, Kate.
How do I say this? Does the student find does the student find the guru, or does the guru find the student?
You know, that's a great question. I can give you my own experience answer, and I can tell you what Yogacharya said about it. And I can also tell you what the yoga scriptures say about it.
Okay.
When the student is ready, or the aspirant is ready to go to the ends of the earth to find his guru, he appears close at hand. And I can't tell you that's as apropos as I can get from my own experience. I mean, I was ready to go wherever I needed to go to find my guru. And I wanted the experience that Yogananda had. Many SRFers, and I'm not criticizing them, everyone has their own path, but many SRFers are satisfied to say, well, Yogananda is my guru. Or many Christians are satisfied saying Jesus is their own guru. If that's how they feel, I'm okay with that. I don't care. But my experience was, as exalted as a soul as Yogananda was, he found his own guru, Sri Yukteswar. As an exalted as the soul of Jesus was, his guru was John the Baptist. If they have their own gurus, I wanted to have mine. And I was ready to go wherever it took me. And he ended up being in Detroit of all places. Who could ever imagine that you'd find your guru in Detroit? How unbelievable is that? And also what the scriptures say, my guru said, is it's a combination of both. The guru has to accept the disciple, but the disciple has to accept the guru. And so there's this meshing that begins to happen. There has to be, and I won't have to say, you don't have to get along with them right away. Eventually you will, most likely. But right away, you might be a little bit like oil and water, because you're not really quite prepared yet to absorb the teachings of a true guru. And so I know many disciples, myself included, I can't tell you how hard Yogacharya was on me when I first went to the retreat. It got so bad. I had a good friend. He's still my best friend. Lives in Sacramento now, but he was from Chicago, and he came to be on staff at the ranch about 3 months before I did. And he's a year younger than I am. I'm from Detroit. He's from Chicago. And we were bumpkins. We didn't know how to do anything. And here we are trying to work at the ranch, you know. And Mr. Black would yell at us all of the time. I mean, it got so bad that the other fellow's name was Jeff. Whenever we saw Mr. Black coming, we turn around and go in the other direction. And it was devastating to our egos. But you know, that's what he was trying to do for us, was to get rid of that ego, because that's the last step. You have to kill the ego. That's what that last step is all about, the destruction of the ego, because you can't merge with the infinite as long as you think you're separate. And that's what ego is. It's that idea that you're separate from the infinite consciousness. So gurus can be tough on you, but you really do have to search one out. But they're not easy to find, but they're not that hard to find either. You know, there's this idea in a lot of the religions kind of prophesize it, or not prophesize the right word, but they propagate it, that, you know, there's only one, or at the very least, there's hardly any. Well, that's not true. Even in the Dark Ages, Mr. Black said, there's at least 2,500 masters on the planet. And as we go through this ascending cycle, which we're in now in this ascending yuga, there's more and more all the time until we get into a Satya or a golden age. And then virtually 75% of the population is enlightened. That's what a golden age is about. But most of them are not known. Their work is done in the shadows. They have a few disciples that they're trying to gain enlightenment, and they work with them, and they're not well known in the world. That's most of them, their mission isn't out in the world. I mean, even before Yogananda, you know, today, because of his book, so many millions of people know about Sri Yukteswar, so many more know about Lahiri Mahasaya, but in their day, hardly anybody knew about him. Lahiri Mahasaya, who was back before it was Sri Yukteswar's guru, was about the same time as Ramakrishna. And in that time, they were about the same time frame. In that time, Ramakrishna was much better known in India. And until Yogananda came to America and wrote his book, hardly anybody knew about those people. But there wasn't anybody more enlightened than those people. So you have to search them out a little bit. And when you find them, somehow they'll make it known to you. But you also then have to accept them. I know a lot of people that knew Mr. Black, and they looked at, well, he was just a nice old man, kind of happy, a little eccentric. He was a disciple of Yogananda's, and okay, good. But I looked at him, he was my guru, and he wasn't very vocal about it, because that's a tough stance within the organization. So he never really said that. But if you were his disciple, he let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that a good enough answer? I saw a
Yes.
hand up there. I think it was Carl.
Yes, I've heard it said that the guru is within. Can you talk about that?
In the end, of course, that's the ultimate guru is within. God is the ultimate guru, and God is within. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven within. But in the beginning, most people aren't prepared for that. They're not ready to do that. But when the guru gets to you to a certain state, then of course the guru is in. My Yogacharya used to say that often. But you know what? Most people aren't ready for that in the beginning. Most people, virtually all, I would say, but I hesitate to say that because, like my guru said, all things are possible with God. So I won't say it's impossible, but I would say virtually no one achieves God consciousness without a living guru. Jesus created the whole Christian religion is created around Jesus, and he had a guru. I don't know. Does everybody know that John the Baptist was Jesus's guru. John the Baptist in the Old Testament was Elijah, and Jesus in the Old Testament was his disciple, Elisha. And they incarnated. You can read it. A lot of that stuff's been taken out of the Bible, but it's hard for them to get rid of all the truth. And it actually says, I think it's in Luke, where Elijah had to come before the Christ. And then they knew that it's John. I think it was one of the angels, it might have been the archangel Michael, came to John's mother Elizabeth and told her she was barren before that. She was going to have a son, and she was to name him John, and he was going to come in the power and spirit of Elijah. And even then further down, that Jesus got baptized by John the Baptist, because Jesus knew he was his guru, and that the way of righteousness is that you have to honor your guru. So even after you recognize your inner guru, you never lose that unbelievable bond to your physical guru. And that goes beyond the grave. And I mean, I communicate with my guru often, as often as I want. He's always there for me. Keeps me in. He yells at me once in a while too. One time I was trying to do something different from one of the Kriya techniques, and occasionally I still do it now, but I'm doing it and he comes to me in a vision. He says, just do it the way I taught you. What a great lesson for me. Oh, come on, you must have some questions. I can't answer everything. Well, I can answer everything, but not in an hour.
Well, I don't know what to ask.
Well, I'll ask something. This is something I've actually given thought to over the past year. This year has put people into positions I would call yogic that they may not care to be in, or they may embrace. And that would be the isolation versus the, I don't know what you'd call it, the rebellions. What would you think of that from a yogic point of view?
Well, I think for most people, this has been a tough time for us. We're not used to the isolation. Yogis actually are kind of used to the isolation because they learn how to meditate so much. And plus we get ourselves healthy. And I have to say personally, my wife and I have been almost had no effect on us at all, except it's prevented us from going out to restaurants and meeting with people we know. But we've been quite active throughout the whole thing. In fact, we used in the spring when they first shut things down, we got a Metro Park pass, and every week we'd go out and explore another Metro Park because there weren't restrictions on being outside. And that was a wonderful thing for us. And that we've always had our meditations, and we've used the internet and the modern technology to make it available so that some of the people that have meditated with us all along were able to join us virtually through the internet. We violated some of the rules. We didn't publicize it, but we never really closed down our meetings. Anybody who wanted to come, we let them come, and we didn't wear masks inside. And I'm not saying that to flaunt it. My guru said, yogis are fearless. We're not stupid, however. We keep ourselves in a safe place, but we're not afraid of things. And so once you get into this mode and you learn to take care of yourself and your health, what's there to be afraid of? And then you know about my guru said there are two great laws of God and nature that you need to begin to appreciate and understand before you can make much spiritual progress. And the first of those are the law of continuous life, that your soul is immortal. Your being, what you truly are, not your body. Your body's pretty temporary. What are you going to live? 60, 70, 80, maybe 100 years if you're lucky today? That's pretty temporary. But what animates your body, what gives it life, that soul, the life force, that's immortal. is part of God, really. And so you have to understand, first of all, the law of continuous life. You're never going to die, really. Your body will, but you won't. And then the second great law is the law of cause and effect, which in the East they call karma. Now, what that means really is that everything that happens to you is your own fault, either because of something you did in the past, something you're doing now. And so everything that happens to you, you caused it to happen to yourself. So if you're in a tough situation, I feel bad for you, but you don't have anyone really to blame but yourself, and you are the way out of it. And how do you get out of any tough situation? You start doing positive things so that you change your future. You can't change your past. You change your future by what you do now. And so you change, if you understand those great laws, that's a little intimidating, particularly if you're going through rough times in your life. But what it is, it's really liberating, because what it means is that you're in 100% control of your destiny. Your future is decided by what you do now, not by what anybody else does. Doesn't matter what anybody else does. Might have some effect on you, yes, but the more and more you get into yoga, the less and less outer things affect you. And the more you let them affect you, the worse off you are. You want to get into this place of unattachment or non-attachment, where you look at the world and you have compassion. I don't want to say you don't have compassion. You do have compassion, because every soul is a brother or sister soul. So you feel bad for their experience, but you see it mostly as a picture show. The Hindus and yogis call this creation God's sport or Leela. You have, or you might look at it as it's this big drama, this act or this movie. And when you can begin to see creation a little bit that way, you don't take it quite as seriously. So these outer things don't have any effect on your soul, really. They might effect on your body, but your true nature, they don't have any effect on that. Your true nature, your soul, is really changeless. It's the creation that changes. Your soul, God doesn't really change. He's ever changing bliss, but God itself is changeless. It's the only real reality. You know, all religions believe three things, and yogis add a fourth. Doesn't matter what religion. The first thing is, all religions say that God is omnipresent. I say that's sufficient enough to keep you occupied in your thoughts and philosophy for the rest of your life. Think of what that means. God, does anyone disagree with that? I've talked to a lot of ministers and priests. Nobody has any argument. All religions believe God is omnipresent. And what does that mean? There's nowhere God isn't. So this immature spiritual idea that God is this vengeful God that's going to send you to hell for eternity if you don't do the right things or if you do something bad, I mean, it's utterly unbelievable if you believe that God's omnipresent. Because if God sends you to hell, so what? God's there too. And then the next thing is, God is omnipresent. That's sufficient enough to keep you occupied in your thoughts and philosophy for the rest of your life. Think of what that means. God, does anyone disagree with that? I've talked to a lot of ministers and priests. Nobody has any argument. All religions believe God is omnipresent. And what does that mean? There's nowhere God isn't. So this immature spiritual idea that God is this vengeful God that's going to send you to hell for eternity if you don't do the right things or if you do something bad, I mean, it's utterly unbelievable if you believe that God's omnipresent. Because if God sends you to hell, so what? God's there too. And then the next thing is, God is omniscient. He's all-knowing. There aren't any religions that don't believe that either. God knows everything, knows your thought before you think it. And the last is God is omnipotent. God is all powerful. And that's part of God's nature. Yogis add one more quality though. You could add a lot of qualities, but those are the three main. But yogis add an extra one. They say God is ever new, ever changing, eternal bliss. Because that's what we're all seeking. And can you imagine that God's not blissful or happy? I mean, what's the point of being God if you're not happy? And that's what we all seek. That's why I followed, the number one reason I followed Mr. Black. He is the happiest person I ever met in my life. And I said, that's what I want. And now I'm the happiest person I know. And that's what you want. You want to get this bubble of joy. He used to always talk about this bubble of joy that would start radiating out of his heart center. And he said sometimes he had to be careful when he was a group of people and he was talking, and they have expectations of what he should be saying. And he said I had to be careful because this bubble of joy would begin to expand and I'd lose consciousness and I wouldn't know where I was or what I was saying. So he'd have to keep it under control a little bit. But wouldn't you love to be in that situation where you're so ecstatic that it's beyond belief? It's beyond description. God is beyond description. Ramakrishna, I can't remember the whole thing, but as part of a prayer, he would say that, and he's talking about God, or in his case, he probably called it Divine Mother. He said, I was made speechless by thy sight. That just gives me chills just to think about that. That's what you want. When you think about these things, you want to get a chill and you want to feel joy and bliss. And if you haven't felt that yet, you got to seek it out. And you got to do it consciously because everybody's seeking it out unconsciously. But when they do it unconsciously, they just get thrown about by their past karma and by their whims and moods, by the influences and circumstances brought about by society and other people. And that doesn't get you where you want to go. You have to do it consciously. And until you start to make that pursuit conscious, you're just dilly-dallying around. You're not going to get there. But the great thing is, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Doesn't matter to me. It's for you. It's for your benefit. And if you don't do it, that's okay too. Because you know what? You have eternity to do it. There aren't any souls that are lost. There are not any souls put into hell for eternity. We're all part of God. God is omnipresent. You're already there. Some people say, even my guru said, and I don't like saying this too much to my students because I don't want them to get the idea that they don't have to do anything. They have to do something. They have to use these techniques and practice them diligently with as much focus and concentration and enthusiasm as they can. But in the end, self-realization is the easiest thing you'll ever do. Because you know what? You're already there. Yogacara used to use this analogy. He'd say, do you know why you can't see your own eyeball? Anybody? Because you're looking through it. You know why you can't find God? Why it's so hard to do? Because you're it. You and God are already one. What you have to do is awaken to that fact. Realize it. There's really no separation. That's something we make up. We call it our ego. Like we say, I'm Roy. I get real proud about that. And I've accomplished all these things and I do these things and I'm a yoga teacher. Forget about that. The one thing that I can tell you though, when you achieve that state of consciousness, don't think you're giving up anything. See, that's a mistake. And you get into these people that decide they're going to be priests and nuns and they talk about all they're giving up. And if they're talking about all they're giving up, then they're fooling themselves. You're not giving up anything to find God. When you find God, you have everything. And so when you finally are able to merge into that consciousness and And it's fearful, and that last step is a little fearful because you think, well, if I give up my ego consciousness, what am I? Who am I? What am I going to become? Well, forget about that. Because the great thing of it is you merge into the cosmic consciousness, but once you've achieved that consciousness, you can come back into your ego consciousness anytime you want. Just make sure you don't get caught up there again like you did last time or this time. Keep yourself fluid. You know, there's all these, stories of Jesus appearing before his saints and self-realization fellowship. We have multitude of stories of Yogananda appearing before his disciples, or Sri Yukteswar appearing before Yogananda. Yogacharya was full of stories where Yogananda appeared to him in his own home when he was meditating, giving him heck because he wasn't meditating enough. Talk about having a guru. And then, so even though they attain these states, you can attain these states of consciousness, you don't give up anything. That's a fallacy. That's your ego again. And when you achieve that state of consciousness, what you find is everything is yours. You haven't given up anything. What you're giving up is by identifying so strongly with your physical body and your ego. As long as you get tied to that body, you got all the worries of the body. You got to worry about, what am I going to eat in the morning? What am I going to eat for lunch? What am I going to eat for dinner? What time am I going to go to bed? What am I going to watch on TV tonight? Am I getting along with my son and daughter? Am I getting along with my spouse? Am I getting along with my parents? Will my friends like me? Will they hate me? All of those problems that we all go through in life, they're all part of this little ego game we play. And believe me, we're all playing at it, which is important. Creation's important. I don't mean to say it isn't important. But you want to get into that state of consciousness so you can still play your part and be in that consciousness. There's a great Buddhist saint. Actually, he was a yogi, but he was a Himalayan yogi. He's honored by the Buddhists, so his name was Milarepa. It's a great story. And his guru was so hard on him, because in the beginning of his life as a young man, he dabbled in the black arts. And so he created a fair amount of bad karma for himself, which his guru Marpa could see. And so he just disciplined him unrelentingly. And Marpa's wife would always take pity on Milarepa, and she would give him little treats and stuff on the side. But Marpa always knew, and then he'd even be harder on Milarepa. But in the end, they say that Milarepa could function on all 7 planes of consciousness simultaneously. So you don't give up anything by trying to attain these things. What you're giving up is your inner peace and freedom by staying attached to all the things that you have. And again, it doesn't mean you can't have. I live in Grosse Pointe. I live in a nice area. We drive nice cars. We have a nice home. I have 3 lovely children who are all yogis, by the way. It doesn't mean you can't have those things. You just can't be attached to them. You know what? If we lost this tomorrow, I'd still be a yogi. It wouldn't matter that much. Not to say I want to give them up, but if that happens, I'm okay with it. I worked hard to get here, but that's okay too. Working hard is part of life, and it teaches you a lot of lessons. It teaches you concentration. It teaches you willpower. And the more you can concentrate and focus your attention, and the more you can control your willpower, the more easily you can get things done. The miracles of Jesus become basically child's play. And as Sandy has read the autobiography, is anybody else here? Raise your hand if anyone else read the autobiography. These are, and yogis that are self-realized, these are not miracles to them. These are just knowing how the laws of spirit and nature work, and they manipulate them with their mind and willpower. Much like you might move your finger. How do you do that? That's a miracle in itself, isn't it? turn your head from side to side, each breath, each heartbeat, each of those things is a miracle. How do they happen? Well, they happen through your spirit, your prana, your mind, and your willpower. But we put that stuff on automatic pilot, most of us, and we do very few of those things consciously. Of course, on the other hand, who really wants to be, running each heartbeat or each breath? We want to put that on automatic pilot, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to control it when you wanted to? That's the power that is yours if you learn how to control your mind and control your will, and using your mind and willpower to control the life force or prana or your soul, if you want to use that term. And the great thing is yoga is scientific, particularly the Kriya yoga. It's so scientific, it has technique. It's kind of like if you were in a chemistry lab and say, I want to make water. How do we make water? Everyone knows the formula for water, right? 2 parts hydrogen to 1 part water. And we know that every time we do that, we get water. Never fails, always happens. That's the scientific aspect of yoga. If you practice these techniques religiously, regularly, steadfastly, with utmost enthusiasm, the results are assured to you. And you're going to do it anyway, whether you do it haphazardly. Everybody gets on a path of yoga at some point. If you want to delay it, that's your choice. You can do that. That's fine. God doesn't mind either, really. We have to keep this creation going. This is God's drama, and so not all of us are going to get realized at one point. That's not the way it's meant to happen. Some people have to stay behind to continue the drama. But it doesn't mean you can't get realized, although if everyone got realized, creation would probably collapse because nobody would be that interested anymore. So people stay behind and they learn on their own time, this life, next life. But once you get that spark of interest and you say, that makes sense to me, when that begins to happen to you, Yogacharya used to call that an internal reflux. And when that begins to happen to you, then stop wasting time. You're just dilly-dallying around. Get serious. Do what you need to do. And in the beginning, you might find a lot of different things that appeal to you. That's okay. Search them out. Like you're in the Theosophical Society. I know a little bit about it. I wouldn't be an expert on it, but you want to get a philosophy that really is going to lead you to the goal. And there are many out there. There's, like I said, there's a lot of realized saints in the world still today. And then once you've decided what you like, then find somebody who practices that and is an expert at it. Someone we'd call a guru or a master or a realized being. And then you don't have to live with them like I did with my guru. It's not, but you need to go see him at least from time to time. And until you can communicate inwardly. Like who was it? Somebody talked about an inner guru. Eventually that happens. But for most people, it doesn't happen immediately. It takes some work and practice to develop your inner intuition and inner quality so you can make that connection. And then you hold on to it for dear life. Because it's not an easy path. But in the end, at the end, it becomes easy and you just go, you know, I did nobody can get me off this path. Whatever you say, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I passed that hurdle a long time ago. If you're still there, then it becomes more important for you to hang around with like your brothers and sister disciples, as I'd say. I have so many friends that came in to meet Mr. Black about the same time as I did. And we're still the greatest of friends. And still my best friend other than my wife, I'd say, is this guy I was in staff with in Sacramento. I just called him last week. We talked for an hour. I have such a great time when we talk together, but because we have such an inner bond. And you need to have fellow disciples on the path to support you. It's like a young sapling. Many times we build a fence around it to keep it so it isn't it doesn't get hurt by outside forces until it grows into a big oak and then breaks the fence down by itself, stands on its own. So in the beginning, you need to be around a spiritual teacher, at least sometimes, read their works if they have any. I have hundreds of hours of audio tapes from Mr. Black. I listen to one every morning. I listen to him so much, and I have some that almost no one's ever heard. They used to do fellowships where he at the end of service, they would go down into this room in the basement of the Art Institute. They'd have coffee and tea and cookies and fruit and sandwiches and things, and they probably would spend another 2 or 3 hours down there, and Yogacharya would talk, and there would, people made friends, so they'd have their conversations, and in the beginning of them, it'd be loud and boisterous, but as time went by, more and more people left, and there were less and less people around, and there'd end up being a core group around Yogacharya, and he would talk, and it was just the greatest thing, and it was such a nice thing. I have recordings of those tapes, which one of his disciples recorded. She was a reporter for the Detroit Free Press, and I'm one of the few people that have them, but they're such treasures, and I listened to them so much, it got to be, and it's still true. I almost can't tell where I end and Yogacharya begins. It's just such a wonderful, beautiful thing. And you've heard other saints, Christian saints, other saints say much of the same thing. And that's my own personal experience. And the feelings I have towards him is such that it's just, wow, such a great feeling. You want to have those feelings. And you want to find somebody who's already done it that can help you a little bit. Because it's so difficult in the beginning, because you're still working on getting yourself to behave. You're working on the yamas and niyamas. Then you got to worry about your health with the asana stage. Then you're working on prana, trying to get a hold of the life force within yourself. But then you want to get into pratyahara, and then the final, what they call yoga proper, perfect concentration, dharana, perfect meditation, dhyana, and finally samadhi. Those are yoga proper. You want to be able to get there, and you're going to need some guidance in the beginning. And you need to be around people that have already done it, because they'll take you there almost by osmosis. It's truly remarkable.
Roy, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you, first of all, everything you've said. I really appreciate you being here, and let me just go into my question because I wanted to say other things. But so you said that there are paths of Raja Yoga, which made more sense to me than the way that I've been understanding it. And I don't want to get like petty, because sometimes I ask myself, why bother thinking so hard about this? Just keep practicing, but it's kind of like, well, I want to know the categories, because as they say, there are different paths because there are different temperaments, and we all have to find the right door to open to get us to the same place, which is samadhi. So my question is, first off, you put it as the paths of Raja Yoga, and then underneath that you said, Hatha Yoga, Karma, Jnana, Bhakti, Kriya, and Laya. And got me wondering, because, I never know, where does Hatha Yoga go? It's like, is it because it's newer? Is it because at the time that the Yoga Sutras were written, that wasn't a category in itself? So that's kind of one question I have. And I don't know which one you want to look to, but the other question I have is, Kriya Yoga, I've been trying to understand it, because the way I, read about it just from what Yogananda describes, it sounds like it's Raja Yoga, right? Which is what you're saying. It's a path of Raja Yoga. But in the Yoga Sutras, when I first heard of Kriya Yoga in the second chapter, it describes Kriya Yoga there as mainly 3 practices, and they are preliminary to yoga. And so it's so it's austerity, self-discipline, self-study, and surrender to God. So does that not speak to the current situation? Maybe did Kriya Yoga get so developed from that point that it is just simply that the Yoga Sutras are outdated in that respect, or maybe that it was something Patanjali might not have written about in detail because it wasn't supposed to be given. I don't know where I'm going with the question, but I hope you can just get the feel of what I'm trying to say.
Well, the distinction I make, and my guess is that, I wouldn't be considered a scholar, philosophical scholar, although I think I could hold my own with most people. Where I would have problems is I might not know exact definitions of Hindu words that someone might use. But to me, I don't care. I'm an American. My guru is American. He knew all the philosophy of, I know all the philosophy of the Hindus. I may not know their grammar. I may not know their language, but yoga is universal. So you can find it in every language and every culture. So I'm an American, so I tend to express it in my culture terms. So my understanding in the way I teach Raja and Kriya Yoga, Raja Yoga is the overlying philosophy. I would even say that's true within Patanjali's sutras. I'd even say it's true with most scriptures, like the Old and New Testament, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, or the Quran. Their overall views of philosophy. They very rarely, it's hidden in all of them. Just like in the New Testament and the Bible, Jesus says, if thine eye be single, whole body shall be full of light. That's a yogic technique to focus here. I would say, in fact, in my courses with my students, I say that's the first Kriya that we're taught, is to focus your attention here. That is an actual step-by-step specific technique. And that's the difference between Raja Yoga and Kriya Yoga. And Kriya Yoga really needs to be taught by a guru, a realized person, because as you said, there's 5 main paths of yoga. Some people will say there's 6, depends who you're talking to, and they, as you said, are based on the person's temperament. Are they intellectual? They'll probably follow Jnana Yoga. Are they devotional, full of love and compassion? They'll probably follow Bhakti Yoga. Are they someone who likes to serve other people? They're probably a Karma Yogi. Are they enmeshed in their body and they want to keep, they're probably a Hatha Yogi. All of the paths eventually will lead you there. In fact, I would say a good Raja Yogi will probably use them all depending on their mood. Sometimes if I'm studying, I'm as intellectual as anybody. Sometimes my heart just goes wild. I'm a Bhakti Yogi. Sometimes in my work, I served humanity through my work. I'm a Karma Yoga. What was the other one? I don't know. Whatever. You get my point. And I would submit to you, really, there's as many paths of yoga as there are individual souls. It's just we divide them up into these 5 or 6 categories that are generic, that probably apply pretty much to everybody. But now I say there are many paths as there are individual souls. That's where the guru comes into play. The guru can customize your practices to your temperament. Like when I went to the ranch, I was going up there to meditate and do yoga. Well, you know what I did most of the time? I worked my butt off. we worked out there. We maintained the ground. We plowed the roads. We cut the grass. We built the buildings. I did electrical work plus everything else. My partner in crime, he did plumbing, heating, and he was the mechanic. We worked 16, 18 hours a day. We had a nightly meditation at 8 o'clock, and half the time we'd sleep through the meditation because we were exhausted. Well, that was his method of teaching us. I can't tell you how grateful in retrospect I am for that. And all of his yelling at me, I'm so grateful that he did that to me, because he knew what I needed to progress, and he did it without question. I knew he loved me, but he did it anyway because he knew it was for my own good. It's kind of like a parent that disciplines their child. They hate doing it. I don't know how many of you are parents, but I know Sandy is. She has a young boy, but I know you hate disciplining your son, but there's sometimes you have to do it. And you do it out of love. That's how gurus operate with their disciples. They do what's necessary because they know their ultimate expression of love to you is to get you into a cosmic consciousness. So whatever it takes.
Thank
And
you
they
so
do it.
much for that. I have to say, I wrote that down, what you said. There are as many paths as there are individual souls. I think that really captures the way that the Theosophical Society approaches the freedom that is encouraged for each Theosophist, for each member, but really for each Theosophist, for each human, because it is so individualized, and you are exactly right. I mean, there is no way that one person can practice yoga or any other thing in the same exact way as another, because we are so unique as individuals.
And I want to say something to express what you said, but put a little spin on it. In that, and this is a difficult thing in America. It's not as difficult in India because it's part of their culture, but this guru-disciple relationship is part of the Indian culture, but it's a little foreign to the American culture. And so the problem with taking what you said too far, this idea of freedom, we are all free souls, but I tell you, once you found a guru and you know he's your guru or she's your guru, do what they say without question. Like I've seen so many students of Yogacharyas question what he said, and they hem-haw around, and I never did that. If he told me to do something, I did it without question. I didn't even question him. And you know how much benefit I got out of that? Because I knew, because the objective of a guru is for my benefit. And if I think he's really a guru, why aren't I doing what he says? Am I smarter than the guru? Am I more realized than the guru? How ridiculous is that? So you have to be a little careful with this. Ultimately, we're free souls, but the guru's job, you might say, and their only job, really, some of them build organizations, great organizations, like Yogananda did, but a guru's job is to make realized disciples. And if they can't do that, they're not much of a guru. And so that's their only mission, really. Everything else beyond that is secondary to the guru. They might build an organization, they might do great things in society, but their number one job is to get their disciples realized, however they need to do it. So when you find one, if you find one, if that's of interest to you, when you find one, do what they tell you, because they're only telling you because of, and if you find out that what they're telling you is not in their best interest, then what that's saying to you is they're not really a guru. They're not really your guru.
Well, thank you, Roy. If there's any burning questions, we don't really have time. But,
Again, I've been a blabbermouth.
no, well, I
Apologize.
mean, we know when someone's on fire, we know to let them go, because that's when you get the best stuff. So
No, and I get a little preachy. I apologize for that.
no, that's where all the gifts are. So thank you very much, Roy, for being here. Really appreciate you and sharing with us for the first time. You know, it's we hope maybe in the future you want to come back and we can have our burning questions for you then too. But of course, you know that Roy did share his website. Roy, if you want to give it to me now, isn't it? It's GLYSA.net.
GLYSA.net. Yeah.
Okay, so what I've
Also,
done,
if anyone's interested, I could, I think my emails, you might have that. If anyone's interested in the presentation that I made, I'm happy to email it to you. If you have PowerPoint, or I could even make it a PDF and send you a PDF file.
so how can we do that? You could.
Give them my email address and have them email me. And
So
I'll send it to
okay,
them.
so what I can do is just send you all his email address or something like that afterwards. I have everyone's names down, so if you'd like that, I'll just do that because you're all here, so you got here somehow, right? So the other thing is I did put above, so I put his website in the chat. I did put our website as well. Most everybody here has been with us before, but there are a few newer people that we haven't had in before, so not in. I'm glad that you made it. Yet, I'm glad you made it. We did have a couple others that were here, but what I'd like to just mention to our members as well, remember we run by donations. And so your donations are always appreciated. They pay the bills, even though we're not physically going to the building. We want to keep the building so that when we're ready to go back, we can go back to it.
Yeah, they're important in our society.
Yeah, it's important. So, so we have that. I want to just go over some of the programs we have, and then we're going to close with Oh Hidden Life today. And for those that haven't memorized it, I decided to share my screen so that you can read it, and you can unmute or mute, but it's going to be read slowly. We'll read it together. It does work out. So our programs, I think it's next week, Daya is going to be doing her points to ponder. She's going to be working with astrology. She has a very specific topic. I don't have it in hand yet, but I'll be posting it. You're getting now a weekly email with as many programs as we know about in the future. And I'm just trying to keep adding to the list. Randy is going to be giving a talk on the dangers of ideology, subtle ways in which we stop thinking. So that is March 12th. Mary Lamphere, who's here today, is going to be talking about the healing energies of sound and silence. So she'll talk about meditation and mantra. And specifically, this caught my eye, musical notes associated with organ in traditional Chinese energy medicine, which I know Mary knows a bit about, and the solfeggio frequencies. So that'll be cool. We have Mike Whitty coming back, Gratitude for Life's Challenges. And that's all I'll tell you for now, because I don't need to talk all day. You get the newsletter, but I just want to remind you. And I think that's it. So again, Roy, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, we're happy to have you. So what we'll do is I'm going to share my screen, and then we can take a look. This is such a really beautiful, for those who are new to it. We kind of just think of it as a theosophical prayer. So let's just take a moment to, collect ourselves and close our eyes and take a few breaths. Just be watchful. And then joining me if you would like. Oh, hidden life. Vibrant
In every atom.
atom. Oh,
Oh,
hidden light.
in light,
Shining
shining
in
in every creature.
Oh, hidden
Love,
love. Embracing
embracing
all
all in oneness.
May
All
who
who
feel
feel themselves
one with
as
thee
one with thee
know
know they
are
therefore
one
with every other.
Thank you so much, everybody. Namaste, and we'll see you again soon.
Paramahansaji said,